Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. For the past couple of months I've been interested in anarchist theory and anarchism as a political ideology and how dissidents and revolutionary strategies may lead to a toppling of the status quo, whether that be political, economical or social. In my research I turned to art, to film history, and I found this guy in particular, Jean Vigo. Vigo is almost unanimously labeled as an anarchist due to his father. His father wrote anarchist literature and he participated in dissenting behavior all the time. Jean Vigo himself directed films in the 1930s, and he was known to be a precursor to the movement known as French Poetic Realism, which included magnificent directors such as Marcel Carne, Julien Duvivier, and the most pivotal one of them all, Jean Renoir. What struck me is how Vigo displays anarchist ideas through his visual storytelling, especially in the film Zéro de conduite, or to English speakers, Zero for conduct. Anarchism and revolution are scarcely mentioned in conversation between characters, but it is suggested and highlighted via stylistic choices. This is what sets Jean Vigo apart from the directors of his time. Before we start this cinematic exploration, all you need to know about Zéro de conduite is that it can be difficult to follow at first, plot-wise. At its core, the film is about students at a boarding school overthrowing the school's administration. So how is this achieved visually? In general, Vigo opposes conventions. For example, he tends to avoid establishing shots and he'll simply throw the spectator into the polemics of a scene, disoriented and fumbling for some sense or some coherence. He'll also do these quaint camera angles and odd camera movements. Jean Vigo was a mise-en-scène director. He chose to hide the edit, hide the cut, preserve the shot for as long as possible, and he liked doing long takes. This is a particular cinematic style. It's a picturesque style and it demands order and harmony, and Vigo's execution of it is both poetic and chaotic. Also, Vigo doesn't give a flying fuck about pacing. One of his biggest traits is how he creates a tension between grotesque compression and poetic expansion. At certain points of the film, everything will stand still. They resemble a photograph more than they do a movie. And at other points, his films seem rapid in a way. They will almost jump or do a quick jerk in narrative and in the visuals. I'll elaborate on this in a minute. And more specifically, Jean Vigo was way ahead of his time. The most poignant example of Jean Vigo's forward thinking happens here, the scene where the children are in their beds. The scene shows this rigid grid system of beds. And you can tell how the bodies of the boys are partitioned out evenly throughout this enclosed space. It seems almost cellular. It seems almost as if it could be a restriction of body movement, much akin to that of the prison. The film makes a critique similar to that of Michel Foucault, especially when the three main characters, the three main boys, are waiting at the teacher's bed. The scene resembles closely the panopticon mentioned in Foucault's Discipline and Punish. In this system, it is hypothesized how a prison guard could keep a watch on a whole lot of prisoners all at once. However, the prison guard doesn't have to stand in the center of the structure. It only has to be suggested that someone might be there. The panopticon suggests that people will alter their own behavior due to the feeling of someone watching them. What is so interesting about this scene is Zéro conduite came out 42 years prior to Michel Foucault's book. Secondly, there's this notion of camaraderie in the film, especially in the scene inside the cafeteria. We see the kids starting an uprising, dissatisfied with the food they are given. However, the uprising comes to a complete stop because the kids realize that the woman working in the kitchen is actually the mother of one of the boys. And they seize this uprising, this dissident behavior, because they don't want to hurt one of their own. Visually, the film comments and critiques normal social conventions as well, when one of the main characters, a boy named Tabart, is called upon the principal. In the principal's office, Tabart is being scolded for having too intimate a relationship with an older boy. What's most interesting about this scene is how it exemplifies the grotesque compression I mentioned before. The grotesque condensation comes into play through the shock effects, through the distortion of reality, through the erratic camera angles, and also through the awkwardness of the school's principal. The scene is condensed, it only lasts a very short while. Then there's the most important scene of them all, the scene where Tabard refuses to apologize publicly after calling out a teacher, basically cussing at him. It shows the in-camera editing technique that Vigo and the other directors at the time utilized. You can see how the camera swerves back and forth, first showing the students' reaction to the event, then the reaction of the leaders. And then when we see the last member of the school's leadership step down from the podium, the school is finally ripe for the taking. The scene shows the viewers that hierarchy has broken down at the school, that everyone's equal, and it shows that the students have become aware of this fact too. And lastly, there's the revolution itself. This is where the grotesque compression is being swapped out for the poetic expansion. And the temporal dimension of the film is sort of stretched, allowing the film to breathe much more fully than it did before. This is the part where the famous slow motion scene appears, and the takeover of the school, the revolution, is almost like a ballad. It's almost serene in its insurrection. And when the boys emerge out on the courtyard, you can tell that the film starts to critique religion and government as well. The focus, the scope, is no longer just that of the school. Jean Vigo and Zéro de conduite set the tone for how films depicting similar events take shape. However, the films in this genre are always cut too short. They show the inherently cinematic revolution, the revolution which is a spectacle, which is almost carnivalesque. They don't show the aftermath, they don't give a realistic picture of insurrection as it actually is. And I'm not the only one raising this objection.
Maybe you know my joke, I always like to refer here to that film, did you see it, was it popular with you? V for Vendetta. All radical leftists, it's multitude, it's not alienated party structure, it's multitude people, self-organized win. But my joke is always, you know how the film ends. People break the police cordon, occupy the parliament, and then the end of the film. My joke is always that I'm ready to sell my mother into slavery for a film called V for Vendetta Part 2.
These endings diminish the validity, the realistic expectations of subverting the status quo. They leave a gap in the revolutionist discourse. Anarchist films don't overthrow the powers that be. They merely disturb them. Thank you for watching the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like and to subscribe to the channel.